to make a confession because I sent a thing over with our hero image, and Kinsey took care of it. And when she replied and she said what had to be done, you did suggest that, and I totally forgot. So she had to go to extra work because I didn't. I just thought I'm just throwing myself on the sword.
You're fine. So did she update or change anything for you guys?
Yeah, she changed it. So the slipcover network, we found out that the people who had the slipcover network before us did have a logo. We didn't realize that. Janelle had sort of created one just to have something in that image.
I see.
But we found out they had it, so we changed it out, and Kinsey went ahead and updated it for us when I asked her.
Awesome.
And she told me how to do it, and it was exactly what you told me I needed to do.
Sometimes stuff like that, if you don't do it too, you probably will forget again just because you don't do it too often. So it can be easy to forget those processes. But good, I'm glad she was able to take care of you guys. Well, wonderful. Okay. All right. Well, let's jump into our forms training today.
Okay.
So we are recording. And so the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to go back to the back of your site. The only place we can access your forms is under our forms header and form list. So this is the only place we can access any of the forms in the system. All right, so from here, we've already got a couple of forms created. One I think I did, one I think you guys did. This is over time going to hold all of your forms.
I have to really focus.
And so that's going to end up being a lot over time, but we've got a couple of different things that can kind of help you navigate what forms you've saved in the form list. First of all, they'll always be listed alphabetically. So what's helpful about this is if there's some forms that you're not necessarily needing right away, they're just kind of lingering back here in the back end, you could put some X's or Z's in front of them. That's going to drop them down to the bottom of the list so it's not cluttering up what you're seeing on this initial form list page. We also have a form search bar, so you can search your forms up here in the top hand corner. And then if there are forms that you're no longer going to use, like a 2017 conference registration, you won't need that, in 2018 necessarily. So you can always use your different statuses for the forms and archive it. If you ever wanted to review those archive forms, we have a big checkbox up here at the top of our form area. If you select that, it'll bring up all of your archive forms as well as the forms that you're using presently. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Awesome. Now, when I hover over a form, there's a couple of different things that we can do to each of the forms that we see. So there's these three little dots that'll be next to every form. If we click on that, it gives us two additional options. We can delete our forms. Now, the one thing I want to point out here is the second that there is a form submission, you'll no longer be able to delete your form. The reason why is because we can use forms to collect information on your members and store that information in their profiles. And so if we then deleted the form that we used to collect that information, it's going to delete en masse all of the information you collected, which would stink. So we basically, once there's one form submission, we take away the ability for you guys to delete that form just to prevent you from ever accidentally mass deleting information. So that's another reason you're going to end up having tons of forms in here, right? Because you can't delete forms, even if it's from the 2017 conference. You can't delete it because then you would be mass deleting all that info. So to prevent that, you can't delete it, but then of course you can archive these forms. So it won't be cluttering up the form list that you're using, the forms that you're currently using. You can copy your forms. Copying is going to be y'all's best friend. So if you have events and you have a lot of similar events that are asking the same questions, you can always copy the event form, make a few changes to the event form, and then you've got your new event form ready to use. So instead of having to come in here and start from scratch to create new forms every time, instead you can just copy an existing form to use it, kind of as a template.
Okay.
We can take this form, so this is really helpful. Let's say that you guys have an event and somebody calls you up and says, I really want to register for this event. I don't have time to sit down in front of my computer, or I can't figure out how to do it on my computer, or whatever the reason may be. Can you just register me really quickly for this? You can take this form piece to search for the individual that you want to take the form for, click on their name once you found the individual you want to take the form for, and then you would proceed as that individual. You could also proceed as a new profile. So if it's somebody who's not in your system, you would just create basically a new profile for them. This is allowing you to take the form as if you are them. So
okay.
this will create the invoice and send it to them. It's going to keep that it's going to keep that form submission in their profile so you can search on it. There's a lot of really valuable reasons you would want to take the form on behalf of somebody if they didn't complete it themselves online. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last piece of this is you can edit your form. So editing a form is going to allow you to make changes to the form. It's going to bring you into the form builder, which we're going to look at in just a moment. Same kind of concept here, though. So if you've been collecting somebody's birth date on your membership application, and one day you're like, we really don't need their birth date, you can't go in and remove it from the form. Same thought process. If you did, it would mass delete all that information that you've collected, and we don't want to let you do that. So instead, you wouldn't be able to remove it. So you can't take anything off of a form once there's been form submissions made on the form. However, you can always go in and add new fields. So if you haven't been collecting your members' birth dates and you realize we should really be collecting our members' birth dates, you can always go back into the form and add that field. You just wouldn't be able to take it away.
Okay.
Now to create a new form, we're going to use our big green button up here in the top left-hand corner and select Create a Form. And we just mentioned a moment ago something like creating a form like join our newsletter or something like that, or join our email list. How would you want to word that?
We would word it subscribe to Drapery and Design. And it's an ampersand and Digital Digest.
Now, whatever you're putting in this area is not going to be external. So whatever you name your form is actually not what your members will see. This is purely for you guys to know what this form is being used for.
Okay.
But I'll show you where we're going to name the form in the form itself for your members to see. This is totally internal for you guys, though. Then down here at the bottom, we have the ability to determine what the form is being used for. So we've got two options, but there's multiple different ways we can use these. So just to back up for a second, our form by default is comprised of different sections. There's a login section that will be a part of every form, a summary section where they'll summarize the fields that they've provided to you, a payment section, and a confirmation section. So those different sections will be in every form that you create. The body of the form determines what type of form you're creating. The body of your form can be 3 different types of sections: a membership section, an event registration section, or a general section. If you're creating a membership application, you of course would say that this form is being used for membership. That's going to tell the system to automatically bring in the membership application section into the form for you. So it's just basically building the form for you as you would need it.
So it's building it, assuming you're going to want most of those fields, but if it brings it in and we don't want them, I can get rid of them for this one. Is that how that would work?
Well, there are some built-in fields into the membership application section that you can't get rid of, but it's only like first name, last name is required, and then what member type are you selecting. Those are the only fields that you have to have in the membership application section that it will bring in. The rest you will be able to add in yourself. If you wanted to build on top of that or just leave it as is, you could just leave it as is.
So
that make sense?
It does, but could we hide, like for instance, this one for people to just subscribe to this publication, we just want their first name, last name, and an email address. We're going to make them prospects, but they're really the public. Like, they don't know that we consider them prospects. So does that have to show to them, or can it just be they're automatic?
Okay. So for what you're talking about, that would actually be using a general section. A general section has nothing built into it by default. So you can totally start from scratch on that. And I'll show you what that'll look like, because that's actually what we're going to use a general section for the form that we're about to create. You would only use the membership application section if you are building a membership application. And same thing, you would only use a You would only use the event registration section if you were building an event registration. Both of those have some built-in fields that you have to use, but for this example, it's going to be for like just joining your email list. They're just joining as prospects, and so it's just going to be a general section that they're going to fill out. And that starts with nothing in it.
Okay.
So for this, we could check that it's for membership application. We could check that it's for event registration. For our example, we're going to check neither because it's a general section. It's not for membership. It's not for an event. So we're just going to check neither of them.
I got it.
I
thought you had to pick one, but you don't. So
you don't. Yeah, you don't. And then you could check both. So if you wanted to bring in the membership section and the event section, you could check both. So for us, we're going to check neither, and we're just going to select save.
Okay.
And that's going to bring us into the form builder.
Okay.
Our form builder is comprised of two different columns. We've got a left-hand column and a right-hand column. The right-hand column is just a rough draft of our form. So it's just what the form is going to look like. It's just not pretty. It's not in your template on the front end of the website yet. And I'll teach you how to test your forms if we haven't done that already. So I mentioned that there are some built-in sections to your forms. Just by default, the login section is one of those. Anytime you have a login section, this is what's actually creating whether the member, this is actually what's going to create that prospect profile for your member. So the second that they put in their email address as a new user, and then it's going to ask them to create a password, at that moment a prospect profile has been created for them.
Okay.
Now, I mentioned that when we named our form, that name was internal. It's not what your members would see. What the name of the sections, so this little name and the tag of every section, that's what your members will see. So if we wanted to change this, we didn't want it to say login. We wanted to change it. We can actually select the properties piece for this particular section. We can select properties for every section. And that's going to give us some customizations we can make for this specific section over here on the left-hand side. So instead of just saying login, it might make more sense for this to say subscribe to Drapery and Design Digital Digest, to put the name here. And then it's got instruction for either new users or existing users. Now, for people to be a part of your email list, I wouldn't imagine that existing users would do that because they're already.
Right.
Excuse me.
Right.
So we can change. Do we want to place for all users, existing users, or only new users? Probably only new users. That's going to take away this existing users portion.
Okay.
There's also two toggles here. One, enable login section. So you can turn off the login section, but 10 times out of 10, you really want to leave this on. And the reason I say that is because this login section is, for number one, it's what creates the profile if it's a prospect profile. Number two, if it's not, if they're not like, it's also going to recognize, so if somebody's logging in as an existing user, it's recognizing their profile. So anything that they fill out in the form, it'll store it back in their profile. So you're able to capture that information. It's how the login is how it recognizes the person's profile to store the information into. And then vice versa, if it's information that you've already collected on your member, it's going to auto-populate into the field. So as long as they're logged in, the profile and the form are able to communicate with one another. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, awesome. So there's our login section. Now we need to bring in a general section for this type of form. It didn't do it. It's not going to bring in a general section for us when we create a general form. So we actually are going to bring this in, and this is going to skip us ahead a little bit on what we would typically look at.
Before we move
I'm
on,
going to go ahead. Yeah.
Can I just ask a quick question before we move on?
Of course.
Where it says new user, if you're a new user, enter your email. Can we change the wording in that box?
You can change it in this new users box.
Yeah.
Okay. So anything on your form, whether it's the properties section, so if we select properties for the sections on our form, so just like I did for the login, I could select properties for the summary section. It's not on right now, so we could turn it on and edit the fields that we want them to summarize. We don't have any fields in our form yet, but you'd be able to edit them. But basically, anytime there's a properties for each section, you can click on the properties, and that on the left-hand side is going to show you what customizations you can make to that entire section. Okay. Same thing with the fields, like individual fields on the form. We can select individual fields, and it's going to show us what we can customize about that specific field on the form as well.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Actually, let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about the sections, the other sections in our form before we add our general section. So we've talked about our login section. We've looked at the summary section. Once we add fields to the form, we'll be able to decide or determine what fields we want them to summarize. Right now, we don't have any, but you would just select properties, edit the summary fields, and you'll be able to select what fields you want them to summarize before they do the final submission of their form. The payment section, you'll always, and this is something else I want to mention. On every form you ever create in the system, whether you copy it or create it from scratch, you always want to make sure you set up the summary section, the payment section, and the confirmation section. So the payment section, you'll always want to make sure that you've selected your payment processor. There's those invoice templates that you guys created a while back. So this is where you would decide, okay, they're not making a payment for this, so you don't have to set it up, of course. But if they were, you would need to make sure you're selecting the correct invoice template for them, the correct payment processor. And then if you want them to be able to come back and pay the invoice later, you would turn on enable pay later with invoice. If they have to pay the invoice at time of form submission, you would leave that toggled off, and they would have to pay it at the same time that they submit the form.
Okay.
And then the last section is the confirmation section. Same thing here. I can click on the specific field on the form, and what this will do is it's going to bring up a confirmation page. So when they submit the form, they're going to see this confirmation page, and it's going to say, thank you, your form has been submitted successfully. You can edit this confirmation page and add whatever verbiage you would like to add here. You can also use our merge data field down here at the bottom. The merge data field will allow you to merge in information from the form, so it can act as if it's a receipt. So it can even bring in information about the invoice if there was an invoice created for the form.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the even cooler part of this is we can look at the properties section for the confirmation section, and we can set up a confirmation email. This is really awesome because, once again, you can use a merge data field to create like a receipt that the individual would receive in their email. That's awesome. But on top of that, you can BCC yourselves on these emails. So you're not having to come in the system every day to see if you've got a new member, to see if somebody's signed up for your newsletter or whatever it is. Instead, you're getting a copy directly to your email. You would just add your email address in, and you can add up to 10 BCCs to these forms. Do you see how that could be really useful?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, before we keep rocking and rolling forward, we've kind of been through the built-in sections of our form. Any questions on any of that?
No. Nope. Not so far.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So that's all on the right-hand side, just our sections, and eventually it's going to be where we drag in the different fields that we're going to add to our form. We've already looked at under the element properties tag on the left-hand side. We've talked about how this has to do with different customizations you're making per section or per individual field on your form. Then we have a form settings tab. This is similar, but whatever you do under the form settings tab applies to the form as a whole. So element properties has to do with individual sections or fields. Form settings has to do with the entire form.
Okay.
Things like the form name. You could add a form description. Both of these are internal, but they would affect the whole form, right? Not just one particular field or one particular section, but if you change the form name, that's changing the form name for the entire form. form alias, so we talked about in our content training, the alias is what completes the URL for your form. So if somebody went to crl.membercooks.net/subscribe-2-drapery-design-digital-digest, that would take them to this specific form.
Okay.
What's the status of the form? Is it published, unpublished, or archived? I'm going to go ahead and publish it. If we want, we could turn a form expiration date on, so the entire form will expire. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can. That's like event registrations and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So for this, we wouldn't turn that on, but exactly. Permissions. Who can even see the form? If you don't want particular individuals to even be able to see this form, when they click on it in the menu item or wherever they're getting access to it, it'll say you don't have permission to view this form. So if you had an event and anybody could register for the event except for DIY members, maybe because they're not paying, they can't come to this particular event, you can just uncheck them and everybody would see the form except for DIY members. All right, then we've got a couple things, date-based pricing and discount codes. So we don't really have a real-life way to use these right now, but I just want you to keep in mind that these are things that we can use. So date-based pricing means there would be like an early bird or a late fee. Discount codes, maybe you have an event and sponsors can come to the event for a discounted rate. Then you would set those up. Like I said, keep those in mind, and if you guys ever have something that these apply to, you can always call the help team if you guys have graduated at that point, or call me back, and we can walk through setting them up together. But until you really have a real reason to use it, it's hard to understand how to set it up, if that makes any sense. But just keep in mind that we do have those.
Yeah, I do think that's something that we probably want to keep in the forefront, because I had a note this morning that said special offer for those who renew before their renewal date, and I turned around so I could ask you now. Was that going to be a discount, or was it some other something?
I just didn't know. I didn't know like what options were available, and
There was a date-based pricing, so we can deal with it. She said we didn't need to learn it now because if we don't need it, but I'm thinking we might.
Yeah.
So one thing that I want to
so because we might want to consider doing that for this December.
One thing that I wanted to point out is that traditionally you wouldn't be able to use these for, actually it's not traditionally, you can't use these for dues renewals or anything that has to do with dues pricing. We could accomplish something like that through another method, but these are only communicating like on event registration forms, or like for an event or some other type of thing that somebody might be paying for. If there's payment on the form itself, membership dues are pulling from a different area, so it can't communicate with them through forms.
Okay, I got it. So it probably can be done. This isn't the way to do it.
Got it. Because the other thought was to do something where offer them a coupon to a vendor if they renew before a certain date, but I don't know how that actually gets worked.
Yeah, we still have some figuring out to do.
Okay, so we'll get our ideas together and then find out how it can be done that.
Okay. All right.
Awesome.
Thanks.
That sounds awesome. And yeah, but just great ideas, because you might end up thinking, you know, we want to, for people who register between now and January 1st or something like that, you could provide in the confirmation email a discount code that you set up in the upcoming event. And then, or maybe it's an online webinar, you know, whatever it may be. And then you can give them the discount code and say, hey, make sure you use this discount code when you register for our upcoming event to receive 25% off or whatever it is. And then as of January 1st, you would just go in the confirmation email, delete that verbiage out, and now it's no longer available for anybody to take advantage of it because nobody else is going to receive that discount code. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds, cool. That'd be a good option too.
Yeah, different things that you can do with what we got going on in here. So, all right. Awesome. Okay. Okay, then the last thing, forward URL. So by default, when your members submit a form, by default, they're at the end, once they've submitted it, are taken back to the home page of your website. You may want to redirect them to a page with more information on member benefits, or to a page with information on the upcoming event that they just registered for. If you ever wanted to redirect where they're going after they submit the form, you would just put that URL in this area at the bottom here, and that's going to trigger wherever they go once they've submitted the form. Okay. All right. All right, so the next item that we're going to look at, add form elements. So when you've created the form and you're ready to start building it, adding elements, we're going to go to add form elements. Some of this should look familiar. We've got your built-in attributes and your custom attributes. So these are those things that we created under our database and attributes menu, right? So anything you created under that attributes menu for the custom attributes are pulling into your form. Anytime you use a built-in or a custom attribute, those are the fields that take the information, pull it from the form, and save it in the member's profile. Form fields are only going to save, anytime you use a form field, it's only going to save the information in the form submission itself. It's not going to save it in the member's profile. That's going to be useful at some point. A common example I use is if you guys are having a luncheon and you need to know what food option do your members want at the upcoming luncheon. You know, do you want a ham sandwich, a turkey sandwich, a veggie sandwich? You don't need to know 5 years from now that Bob had a turkey sandwich at the 2017 November or December luncheon, right? You would just need that for the form submission to get a tally on for the caterer or something. So you would use a form field to collect that information. Same with pricing. You don't need to know 5 years from now that Bob paid $25 to come to the December 2017 luncheon. You just needed that information for the invoice to be created. So you wouldn't make a custom attribute. You would just use a form field just to collect it for the form submission. Does that make sense? That thought? Did I lose you?
No, I'm here.
Okay. Did that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
I didn't know you didn't hear me.
The last tab that we have are presentation items. These all have to do with how the form presents itself. So a lot of these are just like, you know, a white space is going to be a separator between fields that we've added. Page break is going to just ask them questions, and wherever you put the page break, they'll hit next, and it'll bring them to a new page. A label is the same as a text box. Horizontal line is another type of separator. Then we've got the event section and general section. So if we ever mess up that beginning area when we first created this form, or in our case, we need to bring in the general section, all we have to do is grab our general section, and it's going to show us on the form by turning green exactly where this section needs to go. So this is simple as me grabbing and dragging.
Okay.
Now, I mentioned in the beginning that your member will see whatever is on each of these tabs for each section. So we don't want them to see general section. They're going to be like, what's a general section? So we're going to go back to properties for the general section and update the name of this. Whoops. Let's go back here. All right, and now we're ready to start building out our general section of our form. So what are some questions that you want to ask those individuals that are becoming a part of your email list?
See, for them, we really don't care. They're just prospects. They're just going to be on our email list. Or,
So maybe a name.
Yeah.
And then maybe
First
an
name, last
email.
name. Yeah. Oh, I thought that was already up there at the top. So that's, yep. But yes, you're right. Email.
Do you want a phone number or anything like that?
Nah.
Do you want the preferred email or business email?
Just preferred. I think it's fine.
Okay. So when I'm clicking on each of these fields, it's giving me the ability to change things about it. So what I want to do is make it required.
Yeah.
So we've pretty much have completed this. So at this time, we'd want to use our I'm sorry, use our summary section. Honestly, they probably don't even need a summary section for this. So that's kind of all we have to do for
Okay.
this. So let's go ahead and test it. So to test your forms, we're going to use an incognito window. We're going to just take the first part of the URL and combine it with the form alias, which is under the form settings tab. So this is what your members will see. We probably want to change this text,
Yeah.
but then you'll put in their email. Register. It's going to prompt me to create a password. It can be as simple as the number 1. We're going to create the profile, and once we select create profile, at this time a prospect profile has been created for me. Now it's just going to ask me for my name. It's just having me confirm my email. And then we can hit submit, and they're a part of your email list.
So they have to get the part that says they're creating a profile. It's not.
Yeah, they have to, that we can't change that text, and they have to see that.
Okay.
I mean, the only way we could make that go away is if we took away the login section, but that's not going to automatically create the profile. You guys would then have to take the information from the form submission and manually enter it.
I don't want to do that.
No, I think that this would be the best way.
Yeah, I wonder if I forget what it said, because I know the one place I want to go in there and do a little wording change. But is there any on that intermediate page where they, or that little, where they get the message that they're, what does it say? They're setting up a profile?
Yeah, the only place you can change the text would be in this box here. The rest is shared code. So if we changed it in your product, it would change it across the board, and it makes sense for it to be create profile for just about everything, you know, unless you have something like this. But I've honestly had a lot of associations who use something very similar, either for like a contact us or be a part of our newsletter or whatever it may be. And they go through the same process, and it has worked really well for everybody. What are you thinking?
I'm just writing something down. I don't want to forget.
No, you're
I'm
fine.
wondering if I can put in this little new user section without being too wordy to just say, you know, we'll something like we'll set you up with a profile so we can send you an email, like just so they know that it's just to get the, you know what I mean? I don't want people to sort of back off.
Because it's creating a profile.
Yeah. And also the whole thing about putting in a password. I think.
Say that one more time.
The whole thing about them having to put in a password. And I know you just said it's as easy as putting in a number 1, but it's not only that that's clear. You know, I just don't, because it really is, it's just, we're just adding them to a mailing list and sending them.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing about having them do that is it is creating a profile for them, and that's going to store historical data. So like you'll be able to see what email. So let's say that Bob he becomes a part of this mailing list for you, and he's a part of the mailing list for a year, and he decides he wants to become a member. And so when he calls you, you would be able to go into his profile and say, wow, he's been receiving our emails for the last year. You might even be able to determine what marketing outlets you use that worked for him. You could also see if he's come to any events, because it's also so if he came to an event in the future, he would want to log into the event using that username and password. and that's going to store the form submission in his profile as well. You'll be able to search by all of that data. So if you wanted to send targeted emails based on who's come to what, you'd be able to search on that, you know, who completed a form submission of so-and-so event. And then you can send targeted emails that way. And you already have a profile created for him when he wants to become a member. You've already collected a lot of information on him. So I definitely see how it can feel like you're creating more steps than what the person needs to go through. But it's just such a best practice for you guys in terms of collecting information on your members. And it hasn't deterred anybody, because I've had the same feedback, but it hasn't deterred anybody from other associations. It always works out like, oh, okay, I get it now, and it really didn't make a difference.
Okay. Just have to see, right?
Well, and playing with this text up here is a great idea. I mean, if you put some verbiage up here and then, you know, you realized you needed to expand or you didn't need as much verbiage as you gave, you can always change that over time. You'll always be able to edit that text box.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So this is done. Now let's look at your membership application. I think that that's already complete for you guys, but let's go take a look at it. So we've already talked about the right-hand column of our form. We talked about the form settings tab, the element properties tab. Then we've got this add form elements tab. And so I've already built out your membership application. I think you guys maybe added some stuff to this, or maybe I did that.
Yeah, I think I did some, and then you did some when we were on the phone on one of our other calls. You
Awesome.
did some things I didn't know how to do.
So this
and
is
actually,
pretty.
I did just see some. I'm sorry, something just scrolled by, and it reminded me of another question. And it was where we had the custom attributes, and when we did the import, where I had done the mapping for the what services you offer, I made a mistake. I missed one. We had on ours slip covers with an S on the end, and on the form that we import from, it was just slip cover, no S. And so it created a new one. So what I did was I deleted the old and just left it slip cover. But if I wanted to ask you, if I want it to be slip covers, there were only 41 people who had that. So if we want it to be slip covers, is there any way to go in and change those 41 people and make it slip covers without having another value, or do I have to go into each profile?
There's actually an easier way. All we have to do is go to database and attributes, and into that, what services do you offer? And just add an S.
And that will change it.
Yep.
And it will change it on all the profiles, and we won't have two.
Exactly. So now if I do a profile list, I can edit my column view, and I'm going to say that I want to see those responses. So now slip covers is how it'll read.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And then it's got all those listed in the profile now. So that was pretty easy. There are a couple of other things there's really just two more things that I want to go over with you in forms, but I don't want to get into it because I'm a little bit afraid that I will not have enough time to make it through, and I don't want us to, so I think I'll pick back up on that on our next call. Okay. Do we already have our next call scheduled? I think that we do.
We have Wednesday at 1 p.m.
Awesome. So that's kind of like our go live call.
Right.
We're going to do some testing on that call, and then I'm going to add review form price fields. So I just want to make sure I show you guys how to add price fields to your forms.
Okay.
So we'll do that. And then we're going to do our go live. We're going to create a test invoice. We're going to test Moolah. I'm going to resend your go live checklist to you guys.
Okay.
And other than that,
I don't think you need to resend it again. You sent it on the last call, so we have it.
okay. Have you had an opportunity to start going through that?
Well, we were looking at I mean, we haven't done any test invoices, but we can do those next week. I was looking at creating the invoice, and I think it looked like you had already done it. And then I was looking at the revenue accounts, and it looked like that was pretty straightforward. Yeah, well, I don't think we've done any test form submissions. We've set up the forms.
So what I would recommend is testing those forms that I've created for you, the membership application and that newsletter. I mean, we just tested the newsletter, but go through the same process of testing those and just use your incognito window like I showed you. So if you're in Chrome, mine's a little orange dot, but yours might be 3 little dots stacked on top of each other. Why is that disabled? But basically we'll select new incognito window, and then just like I showed you, you'll put your form, the first part of your URL, and then the form alias is the second part of the URL to take you to the form. Just test those. Don't submit them yet, because once you submit them, we won't really be able to make edits. So unless you're 100% happy with how they look, don't submit anything. But you can go ahead and be testing those to make sure that they look the way you would like for them to.
Just make sure they look right. Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't test them, but don't submit.
Exactly. And other than that, I mean, we are in really good shape for our call later this week. And if you have any questions between now and then, just let me know.
Okay, I will do that.
All right. Anything else? Yeah, of course. Anything else I can answer? Are you good for today?
I think for today, yeah.
All right. All right, awesome. Well, y'all have a great start to your week, and I'll talk to you a little bit later.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thanks. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.